Fernanda Gonzalez Serrano was a Mexican woman who lived a quiet life in 2019 until she disappeared one day, leaving her loved ones in complete despair. A few weeks later, an anonymous call was received by the emergency services, informing them of the location where Fernanda had been buried. Her loved ones were deeply shocked to learn who was responsible for this tragedy. Born in the Mexican city of Tijuana, Fernanda was the eldest of three sisters. She had a particularly close relationship with her sister, Erika. She grew up between two countries. She had a visa and regularly attended school in the southern part of the American city of San Diego. At 16, she met a man named Bodelio Juarez, who changed her life completely. At the time, Bodelio was 29. He was already divorced and had three sons. Despite the age difference and the potential difficulties this relationship could bring, Fernanda quickly fell in love. Shortly after beginning their relationship, the couple married in San Diego. Later, the couple settled in Tijuana and began a life together that seemed like a new beginning. According to relatives, Fernanda was not only kind-hearted, but also very calm and balanced. She always strived to maintain a good relationship with her sisters and created a harmonious and supportive atmosphere within the family. After the wedding, Bodelio suggested that Fernanda stay home while he provided for the family. He worked in San Diego, where his sons lived, and therefore frequently crossed the border. Fernanda also continued to travel regularly to the United States. Bodelio was deeply religious and introduced his wife to the Christian faith, which she embraced and considered part of their new life. These changes also reflected Bodelio's influence, which gradually transformed Fernanda's views and outlook on life. Although outwardly everything seemed perfect, behind the facade of a happy marriage lay a multitude of tensions. The first to learn that Fernanda was suffering from her husband's brutal behavior was her sister Erika. Fernanda confessed to Erika that Bodelio had repeatedly beaten her and also consumed illicit substances. Erika was alarmed by her sister's stories and advised her to leave him, but Fernanda hoped that love would prevail and everything would change, and she didn't dare take that step. She also didn't turn to the authorities for help. Over time, however, the situation worsened. Fernanda called her sister more than once and asked her to get her out of the house because Bodelio was causing scandals that ended in aggression. Erika tried to intervene and had numerous arguments with this man. But despite all the difficulties and warnings from her relatives, Fernanda stayed with Bodelio. To everyone else, from neighbors to acquaintances, the couple seemed perfectly normal. No one had ever heard of any arguments or complaints from Fernanda. On weekends, they spent time with Bodelio's three sons, and since 2012, the eldest, Aaron Seth Juarez, had stayed with them sometimes at their home. At first, Fernanda got along well with Aaron, but with the onset of puberty, the boy began to exhibit behavioral problems. He was no longer calm and obedient, but became increasingly rebellious. Fernanda saw this as a natural phase of growing up and hoped that everything would soon settle down. Unfortunately, the situation only worsened over time. At the end of 2018, 20-year-old Aaron finally moved in with Fernanda and Bodelio. As before, Fernanda continued to take care of the family and the household. Fernanda quickly realized that the situation with Aaron was much more complicated than she had imagined. Not only was he aggressive, but he also abused illegal substances and carried a weapon. On her 32nd birthday, December 1st, she met with her sisters to celebrate her birthday. At the time, she told Erika that Aaron had been living at their house just a few days earlier. When Erika asked her how she felt, knowing that Fernanda and Bodelio had bought a plot of land and were planning to build a new house, Fernanda explained that with Aaron's arrival, all the money she had saved for his bail and to resolve his legal issues had been spent. All the savings intended for the construction had simply disappeared. In the following months, a true nightmare began for Fernanda, as Bodelio simply refused to accept his son's dangerous behavior. A few months later, on February 3, 2019, no one in the family could reach Fernanda. She didn't answer her phone. This was very strange, as she had never left her family without a message and had always been available. Attempts to call Bodelio were also unsuccessful. Time passed, and as the day drew to a close, the family members were convinced something was wrong and decided to contact the police to report Fernanda missing. The authorities' response shocked them. They were told that Fernanda had probably left on her own or had another man. This explanation only increased their feelings of helplessness and fear. A few days later, on February 5th, the family learned that Bodelio was in a San Diego hospital with a gunshot wound to his forearm. This was reported to them by an employee of the Tijuana District Attorney's Office, who had contacted the city police. Bodelio explained that he had been attacked by an armed man who was attempting to rob their home and had been injured. According to him, the injury was minor, which is why he decided to seek treatment in San Diego. Erika immediately went to the hospital to speak with Bodelio and find out what had happened, as she was primarily concerned about her sister. Bodelio later gave a more detailed statement to law enforcement. Initially, he said that $5,000, which he had hidden at home, had been stolen. However, he later changed the amount, stating that dollars were missing. He claimed that he had said goodbye to his wife that morning as usual and gone to work. They talked about their son Aaron, after which Bodelio left for work. Around 7 a.m., he texted Fernanda to say he was already there and then continued his workday. According to Bodelio, when he returned home that evening, he noticed one of his dogs sitting on the sidewalk. The neighbor said the dog had been sitting there since noon. Bodelio said he looked in the garage and saw that his wife's car was not there. He thought she might have gone to the nearby gym. Then he saw Aaron and scolded him for taking his car without permission. Before entering the house, he went to a store. Upon returning, he smoked a cigarette and only then went inside. He was about to reprimand his son again, but upon entering the room, he found himself confronted by an unknown young man pointing a gun at him. Bodelio described the stranger as slim, with white skin and dark hair. Bodelio reported that the unknown man shot him in the right forearm, causing him to fall to the ground and lose consciousness. When he came to, his son was crying next to him and asking what was wrong. Bodelio told his son to drive him to San Diego. Investigators immediately found the story dubious, as the house had guard dogs and a stranger couldn't have simply entered Aaron's room without making a noise. These inconsistencies led police to suspect that the situation might have been related to a conflict between Bodelio and Fernanda that had gotten out of control. It was assumed that they had argued, and Fernanda may have attacked Bodelio, which is why he refused to help investigators and went into hiding herself. When Erika met Bodelio, he told her he didn't know where Fernanda was, repeating the statement he had already made to law enforcement. He had come home that day and discovered that Fernanda, the money, and her belongings were missing. According to Bodelio, Aaron told him that there had recently been an argument between him and Fernanda because he was spending too much time gambling. This information worried Erika, as she knew what Aaron was doing. After leaving the clinic, she immediately went to the public prosecutor's office to explain everything she knew about Aaron's lifestyle and to express her concern for Fernanda. The authorities then appealed to the town's residents for help in the search for Fernanda. To inform the media and the public, a missing person notice was issued, listing Fernanda's distinctive features, including a birthmark on her chest. It wasn't until 2 days later, on February 7th, that the family learned that Aaron was still in the house where Bodelio and Fernanda lived. They immediately informed the police, who arrived shortly thereafter. When the police arrived at the scene, they found that neither Fernanda nor her car or personal belongings were in the house. Aaron was taken to the police station to ask him some questions, and Erika, not wanting to remain idle, also went there to follow the unfolding events. The first surprise came when Aaron told a completely different story, one that didn't match Bodelio's. He claimed that Fernanda and Bodelio had had an argument that morning. Then she got into her car and drove away. Aaron said he took his father's car to follow her, but couldn't catch her, so he went to a friend's house and only returned home later. These words only reinforced Erika's suspicions. She asked the police to arrest Aaron, but there was no reason to do so at the time as no one knew where Fernanda was. After interrogation, Aaron was released. Fernanda's family was distraught, but they decided not to give up. They printed flyers with Fernanda's photo and pasted them everywhere, and Erika posted a social media post asking anyone who knew anything to contact her. Friends and acquaintances also helped. They printed huge posters with Fernanda's photo and hung them in the central streets of Tijuana. Despite all their efforts, days and weeks passed, but Fernanda remained missing. Erika told local journalists that the police repeatedly suggested her sister might have gone to another man, but Erika knew that was impossible. She would never have disappeared without telling her family. Fear grew. 3 weeks after Fernanda's disappearance, Erika received 2 anonymous calls. The callers claimed Fernanda's body had been buried right in her house. This information was strange and frightening, as the callers were unknown, but she couldn't ignore it. Erika went to the investigators and told them about the new information, seeking their help. However, they didn't take immediate action. They were told that a search was impossible due to the rain. When the authorities finally began, they found nothing important in the house. However, some police officers informed Fernanda's family that they had discovered areas of loose soil that needed to be examined more closely. They planned to return the next day with trained dogs and the necessary equipment. Fernanda's family couldn't wait another day. That night, her father, who couldn't find any peace, called Erika and suggested they go to Fernanda's house together to search for her. The rain had stopped. They dug in the yard for hours, hoping to find at least some trace. While they were there, Baudilio called Fernanda's father. He immediately asked them what they were doing in the house. The father replied that they had only come to feed the dogs. The conversation ended quickly, and the man concluded that the answer had sounded calm. But after a while, acquaintances appeared. Baudilio's family showed up at the house. They had come to find out what was going on and tried to convince the father and his daughter to abandon the search. But Erika and her father were determined to continue. The fear of the unknown was stronger, and despite attempts to distract them, Baudilio's acquaintances eventually left empty-handed. Father and daughter continued digging. For a long time, their efforts seemed futile, but at one point they decided to move the car, which was parked in the yard, and noticed that the ground underneath looked disturbed. The father began digging right there and soon discovered that there was a makeshift grave beneath the ground. After a short time, he and Erika saw that these were indeed human remains. They immediately contacted the police, and specialists soon arrived at the scene. The experts began recovering the remains, while the public prosecutor's office placed the house under guard and applied for a search warrant. The search warrant allowed them to enter the house and gather evidence to identify the culprits. After a few hours, the body was officially identified. Everyone was certain that it was Fernanda's remains, and this was confirmed. Law enforcement officials gave general information to the press, but avoided details about how Fernanda died. All that was known was that the case would be classified as a crime involving brute force, and that an investigation was ongoing. Authorities did not disclose how long the body had been buried. Meanwhile, police officers tried to clarify all the circumstances of the incident. Although official information was limited, reports appeared in the press that Fernanda had died of a gunshot wound. 2 days later, a judge issued a search warrant, and investigators conducted a thorough search. According to official information, stains resembling blood were found during the search. They were found in the bathroom, the living room, and on one of the sofas. Initially, they were not visible, but with the help of special equipment they were discovered. Investigators concluded that Fernanda had been killed in the house and that attempts had subsequently been made to cover the evidence. At this point, all of the police's suspicions focused on Aaron. Officers contacted his acquaintances and neighbors. All evidence pointed to Aaron's possible involvement in the crime and that the body had been hidden in the yard. One of the witnesses reported that a few days before the incident, Aaron, under the influence of illegal substances, had talked about getting money from the house, but allegedly did not express any intention of committing a crime. Aaron was eventually charged with the crime. At the time, however, his whereabouts were unknown, and the prosecutor's office released his photo, asking for help in the search. Fernanda's family offered a reward of $5,000 for information leading to the location of Aaron. Since Fernanda's car had still not been found, authorities issued a plea asking for any information related to the case to be forwarded to both the San Diego and Tijuana police. A few weeks later, on March 6th, Aaron was arrested in San Diego, United States. However, the arrest was not in connection with the Fernanda case, but because he already had an impressive record of criminal offenses in America. He may have been trying to hide with his father to evade American authorities. His record contained numerous problems with the law since 2014. Since coming of age, he had been targeted by police for possession, sale, and transportation of controlled substances, violent theft, possession of weapons, participation in robberies, and, according to unconfirmed reports, for affiliation with a street gang. Most recently, he was arrested for possession of weapons. He was targeted by police for obstructing law enforcement officers and selling controlled substances. Aaron was under court supervision and therefore required to appear in court, but he failed to do so, prompting authorities to issue a warrant for his arrest. When he was brought into the courtroom, he remained calm, and his public defender tried to convince the judge that Aaron had no intention of going into hiding, let alone fleeing to Mexico. The prosecutor told the judge that he was dealing with a man with an extensive criminal history associated with a street gang who should not be released. The judge decided to release Aaron without bail. Fernanda's family was initially relieved, but when they realized the extradition process would be lengthy and complicated, their confidence gave way to concern. In the meantime, they contacted the authorities. The family's attorney later told reporters that the extradition could take at least 6 days before Aaron would be returned to Mexico to face charges for the crime against Fernanda. At the time, Mexican authorities were consulting with their American counterparts about how Aaron could be punished for his actions in both the United States and Mexico. The public prosecutor's office officially confirmed that extradition proceedings had already begun. Investigations revealed that Aaron was not alone on the day of the tragedy. He was in the house with 2 young men with whom he consumed illegal substances. Under the influence of these men, he went to find Fernanda and went to her room. Presumably to prevent her from taking his father's money and belongings, he shot her. He then wrapped the body in a blanket, carried it into the yard, and buried it there. Later, he also attempted to attack Bodelio. A few hours after the crime, Aaron sold several motorcycles to Bodelio. Police had no information about who had helped him cover up the evidence, and investigators continued to gather evidence. A week later, Fernanda's sister stated that she did not believe Aaron had acted alone. She contacted the authorities, asking them to investigate the case. She also revealed that Bodelio himself began to suspect his son and shared his fears with her. He contacted Aaron's mother and his probation officer, who were aware of the entire situation. At that point, Aaron pleaded guilty to the charge of possession of controlled substances for the purpose of sale in the United States. He remained calm in court and was ultimately sentenced to 2 years in prison and 3 years probation. Fernanda's relatives, as well as Aaron's friends and family, including Bodelio, attended the trial. After the trial, Erika told reporters that she had appeared in court not only in memory of her sister, but also to remind the judge that a terrible crime had been committed after Aaron's last release. Fernanda's family continued to take to the streets to demand expedited extradition proceedings and justice. However, there has been no new news in the case so far. More than a year has passed. The house where Fernanda was killed and buried has stood empty for a long time, with peeling paint, broken windows, and fluttering curtains, as if the past lives on within. People avoid this place. Children call it the house of the cursed woman, and the neighbors don't look when they pass by. Aaron is serving his sentence in the U.S. But the question of extradition remains unresolved. Bodelio has vanished. One day he didn't show up for work, didn't call in, and didn't pick up his children. The Tijuana police have opened a new case into his disappearance, but there are no leads or clues. All that remains are suspicions. Perhaps he knew more than he told, and someone didn't like that. Erika didn't give in. She found another witness, a woman who lived on the next street. She said she had seen a third man enter the house on the day Fernanda disappeared. No one had officially mentioned him, but he was tall, tattooed, and wore a hood. He didn't stay long, leaving quickly, as if in a hurry. Erika passed this information on to investigators but received no response. It seemed as if the case was leading to an inconvenient truth. The family received threats, anonymous phone calls, and empty envelopes containing only a photo of Fernanda as a warning. Stop digging. But Erika persevered. She started a blog, recorded videos, and tried to attract media attention. In one broadcast she said, "I'm not afraid. They think they buried my sister, but the truth lies deeper. I'm going to find her and everyone who was involved." And 2 months later, a burned car was found in a forest near Tijuana. The very car that had belonged to Fernanda. In the trunk was a backpack containing the driver's license of a man who had never been mentioned in connection with the case before. Miguel Arturo Ortega, one of Aaron's friends, one of those who had been with him that night. From that moment on, the investigation took a new turn, but Erika seemed to be being watched at every step. One day she received a short, shaky letter. Inside was a photo. A dark figure stood in front of her house next to a flower bed that Fernanda had once planted herself. The caption read, "A grave is not enough. Fernanda's case continues." Thanks for watching, and take care.